It's the 1960s, and this house, well, it doesn't exactly scream home. It actually looks a bit more like a spaceship, you know? It's called Futuro, and the idea was pretty out there. This thing was designed to be a portable, weatherproof dwelling for families who were really looking ahead, thinking about the future and all that. Back in 1971, a police officer found themselves in a very unusual situation. There was a baby, left all alone, and the officer, with their duty and compassion, stepped up to care for the little one. Wipers weren't just for race car windshields back in the 1930s. They also showed up on these special rain goggles that drivers used to wear in open cars. It's all about girl power. This feels like the 1900s. It's the year 1909. Imagine the Wright brothers, their names synonymous with flight, at the forefront of aviation history. This is a portrait of Chang, the Chinese giant, dating back to around 1870. It looks like a wedding. The air is filled with so much happiness. What a special day. I can almost feel the joy radiating from everyone. I bet there was a huge celebration afterwards. Seems like a memory they'll cherish for a lifetime. Way back in 1906, a fellow named Charles S. L. Baker, an inventor, was showing off his new heating and radiator system. He had his assistant with him, and they were giving everyone a look at some of the very first steps in home heating technology. Pretty amazing, really. The scene unfolds in England, where a football match is underway. It's England versus France, and the score is 2-0. This is a match played by the Dick Kerr ladies football team from Preston. The date? The 28th of May, 1920. A long wooden trestle stretching across a valley. A train chugs its way across, linking Knoxville to Middlesboro, Kentucky. This was all happening way back in 1892. Right there in Claiborne County, Tennessee. Frederick Patterson was the first African American to manufacture cars. Way up high, a window washer clinging to the side of the Empire State Building. It looks like a lineup of men, all decked out as women. This must have been quite a sight. It's fascinating to think about the scene. A whole group of them, all dolled up. The photo was taken in Brazil back in the year 1913. It was 1904, and a family had just arrived at Ellis Island. You could feel the excitement, and maybe a little bit of fear too. They'd traveled a long way, and this was the beginning of a new chapter. It was September 18th, 1959. The location was New York, specifically at 655 Fifth Avenue. You could smell the hairspray in the air, because there were a bunch of hair dryers set up. Early one August morning back in 1952, there's a pretty unsettling scene. Up in the sky above Salem, Massachusetts, you see what look like 4 unidentified flying objects. They're just hanging there, suspended in the air. A group of female motorcycle officers stands together in Los Angeles. It looks like it might have been taken way back in 1927. They're all dressed smartly, ready for action. Back in 1955, before all the glitz and glam we associate with Las Vegas, it was a different world. Here's a portrait of an Inuit woman and child. This was likely taken around 1912. It looks like Princess Ivonne and Prince Alexander were in Germany back in 1955. It's a fascinating scene. A female firefighting team is ready to go, perched on a unique vehicle. They're on a converted motorcycle, which seems like a pretty speedy way to get around. The whole thing must be from London, back in 1932. I bet they were a sight to behold. Folks gathered to watch a Chicago Cubs baseball game. This was all the way back in 1932, a time when getting to the stadium was an event in itself. You can imagine the excitement and the anticipation in the air. Wrigley Field must have been buzzing. The Panama Slide. It was built around 1908, way back in the day. The location? Coney Island's Steeplechase Park, right there in New York City, United States of America. It was a place called Bandit's Roost back in 1888. The driver's got his hands full. Looks like he's having to change a flat tire. This was a common struggle back then, especially for folks driving a Model T coupe. This would have been in the year 1927. During that same year, 1959, Fidel Castro was there. He was placing a wreath at the Lincoln Memorial. All right, let's take a look back at the Panama Canal during its construction. Imagine the immense scale of it all. The whole project spanned about a decade, from 1904 to 1914. Workers were carving through the jungle, moving mountains of earth. The sheer volume of work must have been staggering. It was an incredible feat of engineering, a testament to human determination to build a waterway connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. Imagine stepping back in time to the Victorian era. Picture a peculiar wooden structure, a bathing machine parked right at the water's edge. It's a fascinating sight. The air was thick with the smell of the sea in Seldovia. It was 1964, and a group of men were hard at work. They were unloading a massive haul of king crab off a fishing boat. The scene was a blur of motion, strong arms, and the glint of seawater. The air must have been thick with smoke that day. July 15th, 1924. There was a massive oil fire burning on Signal Hill. It's a portrait of Billie Holiday and her dog, Mister. They're in New York City, and it looks like it was taken around 1947. This is a series of photographs called From Window, taken by Masahisa Fukase in 1974. They document his then-wife, Yoko Wanibe. Each day, the pictures capture her as she leaves for work from their apartment in Tokyo. It must have been quite a sight. A rocking stone sits at the Bronx Zoo in New York way back in 1895. It's a scene depicting the Civil War. The acting here is just amazing. In 1940, I imagine Freda Ko painting in her bed. Back in 1959, a goalie named Jacqu Plant made history. He became the first one to ever sport a protective face mask while playing. It's June of 1940, and we're out in Camado, New Mexico. There's a rodeo going on, and the star of the show is a clown. Not just any clown, mind you, but one who's riding a trick mule. Can you imagine the skill it takes to stay on and entertain the crowd at the same time? It's a real spectacle. When she was 23, Rosemary Kennedy, the sister of John F. Kennedy and Robert F. Kennedy, had a forced lobotomy arranged by her father. The surgery left her incapacitated for the rest of her life. In 1955, there's a young man, George Harrison, completely lost in the music. He's got a guitar in his hands and looks absolutely engrossed, you know? It looks like a fella at a bar, you know? Back in 1937. He's got a furry friend with him, which is always nice. Probably having a good time, maybe a couple of drinks. That was a different era, for sure. We're back in the roaring 20s. Picture a place where they're selling and servicing four-wheel drive autos, the big rugged SUVs of the era. And get this, gas is unbelievably cheap, just 20 cents a gallon. It's the 1920s, a time of change and adventure. Two boys are in London. The year is 1902. A train rumbled right down the streets of Syracuse, New York, way back in 1905. A young girl leaps into the air. It's the year 1959, and the joy on her face is clear. Johnny Eckhart was born without a lower body. When he was the right age, he started to walk on his hands. Johnny's greatest passion was miniature racing cars, ones made especially for him. Ava Gardner adored animals. Over the years, she had quite a few different pets. It looks like a tense moment from the street. An American officer and a French partisan are huddled down, using a car for cover. This must have been during a fight in a French city, sometime around 1944. It's 1905, and a German fellow named Carl Ludvig Nestler is showing off his new invention. He's got this crazy hardware contraption that he's using to give someone a perm. Pride and joy. A driver is carefully polishing his brand new streamlined lorry. It looks like it just arrived at Wembley in London. That lorry is built on a Commer 2-ton chassis dating back to the 1930s. Imagine Cambridge in the 1920s. Picture sharply dressed students, perhaps heading to class or strolling through a courtyard. They probably wore suits, maybe with vests and pocket watches. There would have been a whole lot of tweed and classic styles, the kind that still look smart even after nearly a century. It's a glimpse back at a different time, a snapshot of the university life of the era. It looks like 18,000 soldiers have come together to form the shape of the Statue of Liberty. This was at Camp Dodge, over in Des Moines, Iowa, in the United States, and it was around 1918. It's a pretty stark scene, honestly. A massive bomb, they called it Fat Man, sitting on its transport carriage. They were applying this liquid asphalt sealant all over it, especially to the seams of the casing. This was on Tinian Island back in 1945. It's 1935. There's a group of Hungarian men. They're all shirtless, and each one is wearing a gas mask. A young boy is running a lemonade stand. He's got a portable dispenser set up, ready to serve up some refreshing drinks. This was all happening in Berlin back in 1931. There's this fascinating character named Johnny Eck. He was an actor, and born with a body that was a little different, you know? His lower torso didn't fully develop. This picture must have been taken to promote the famous film Freaks back in 1932. A horse-drawn Pepsi Cola wagon is making its rounds through the streets of New York. This was back in 1910, a time when deliveries were a bit slower. There's a young girl, probably drawing, who spent her childhood amidst a war. Now she's living in a residence for children facing emotional difficulties. This was all happening back in 1948. The story takes us back to World War II. There's a sense of struggle, a real fight. It's about the Germans and their attempt to conquer something powerful, like trying to tame a wild animal. The imagery conveys a clash, a forceful encounter. It's a pretty amazing idea, really. Imagine attaching a camera to a homing pigeon. This was back in 1908, so the technology was pretty cutting edge for the time. You'd get a unique perspective, that's for sure. There he is at the tender age of 2. This picture was taken back in 1940. Here's a photo from the construction of London's Rotherheight Tunnel. It shows workers hard at work, taking apart a Great Head Moir shield. You can really see the teamwork and the amazing engineering they used back in the early 1900s. This photo was taken in 1907. Picture this. It's 1870, and you're in Rome, Italy. Towering before you is the Roman Colosseum, a massive structure of ancient history. Nearby, the Arch of Constantine stands tall, a testament to past triumphs. It's a scene that whispers tales of emperors and gladiators, all under the Italian sun. It's completely dark. A man named Colin Evans, a Welsh spiritualist, is pretending to float. He's jumping up and down, really, but it looks like he's levitating. He's filming himself with an infrared camera. This all happened in London back in 1939. It was back in March of 1930, on the 4th to be exact. There's a beautiful plane called the Golden Ray, or Rayon d'Or, and it's being turned around. They're cranking it by hand on a huge turntable. This one was a passenger plane, part of the Blériot fleet. It was used for the Paris to London service by French Air Union. Water carriers. It's Egypt, probably a long, long time ago. I imagine a group of women, maybe daughters of the pharaohs themselves, heading to the river. They're likely dressed in simple gowns, carrying water jugs on their heads or shoulders, probably a daily chore. The sun is blazing and the air is thick with heat. They're off to get the water, a vital task for everyone. It's the year 1918 and you've got Charlie Chaplin perched right on Douglas Fairbank's shoulders. What a sight. It looks like Belgian soldiers way back in 1914 are heading out. They've got their dog-drawn cannons with them, ready to go. They're probably on their way to the Western Front, a tough place to be. In the cool waters of Coney Island, a group of girls, all in bikinis, linked hands. It was the year 1947, and they were taking a refreshing swim together. It was 1961. They were digging in Pompeii. It was 1935, and there was this big competition. They were crowning Miss Idaho Potato. Can you imagine? Here's the photo. It shows Elizabeth Robinson, an American athlete. And you know what? She made history. She was the first woman ever to win Olympic gold in track and field. This all happened during the 1928 Olympic Games. And that was a big deal because it was the first time women were allowed to compete in a bunch of different sports. Pretty amazing, right? It looks like it's the final moments of a dive bomber. The aircraft is plummeting, possibly towards the end of its mission. You can imagine the intense action and the decisions made in that second. It's a moment of extreme tension, maybe even the climax of something, captured in a single frame. There's a darling little kid, just adorable, with a leather satchel. Here's an early design for an electric hairdryer. It looks like something straight out of the 1920s. You can see the basic ideas there, but it's pretty clunky. I bet that thing was heavy. Imagine having to hold that for a long time to dry your hair.